1, 2, 3. Good evening and welcome to Thursdays with NAMI. My name is Peg Morrison. I'll be your host tonight. I am the Assistant Director for NAMI North Carolina. That's the National Alliance on Mental Illness, North Carolina. I'm glad y'all are here. Thursdays with NAMI is our way of building conversations and building community around the topic of mental health. I'm very jazzed about having our guest here tonight, Sean Wellington of Chapel Hill. Sean jumped onto my radar at a meetup that he organized where people were sharing personal stories about mental health. Now, how often does that happen, right? I'd never been to an open mic type event where that was the topic, and it was so refreshing to hear people sharing that part of themselves in a safe space and completely without shame. I mean, of course, we get that in NAMI circles, but to find it elsewhere was very exciting. Sean also produces a podcast called Grit, True Stories That Matter, which has a similar mission of allowing people to be vulnerable and speak from the heart. He'll be sharing some of his own stories tonight. He's a New Yorker at heart who's traveled the world, so he's got an interesting lot to say. As usual, the first part of our show will be an interview with our guest. Partway through, we'll show a video of the week, also Sean, and then we'll spend time answering questions from you, members of our virtual studio audience and Facebook friends. Now, a quick word from our sponsors. Thursdays with NAMI. Oops, sorry there, I hit the wrong button. Thursdays with NAMI is funded in part by the North Carolina Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Abuse Services through the Federal Community Mental Health Services Block Grant Fund. We do appreciate their guidance and support so much. Now, moving right along, again, pleased to have Sean Wellington here. His approach to any subject, wearing a face mask, loneliness, you name it, will make you laugh and cry. Welcome, Sean.
No pressure. Hi, Peg. Good to be here.
I do that to guests. Yeah. You're the first one to acknowledge it out loud.
Okay. That's my MO always. It's really good to be here.
Okay. Well, we always like to hear the background story of our guests. So share that with us.
Background on Sean. Sure. I'm a New Yorker through and through. I've been in North Carolina for about 10 years, like you said, in Chapel Hill. And I don't know if my story's any different than a lot of people's, but I dealt with my own share of mental health challenges in my teens and in my 20s. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about some other health challenges that I had that really put me on this path to essentially be doing the work I'm doing today and being with you and talking about this stuff. Tell me more about what you want to know about me, and I'm glad to share anything about my life. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you can find out about Sean online too. So there's a lot of good stuff, videos, writing, you name it. Well, let's start with your best friend, Jimmy. He was in your life for 8 years and had a big impact on you, profound. Maybe tell us about that first.
Sure. Yeah. So I met Jimmy actually at my college orientation, and both guys from Long Island. We were going to school up in Buffalo, and very short period of time, he became my closest friend. And, at that time we were both 18 years old and just living life. What do you do when you're 18 and you're a freshman? Those are the things that we did together. And then one day in the spring semester, he disappeared and nobody knew where he was. And eventually I found him. He had gone back home to Long Island, and he didn't really tell people why. We resumed our friendship, and that stayed that way for almost 8 years. And it was late November 1997, and I knew that he was struggling, but I was living abroad at the time, so I didn't get to see and talk to him as much as I typically had been. And I got a phone call shortly before Thanksgiving that he had taken his own life. And so that was difficult news. So I think anybody who's lost anybody, but certainly in that kind of way, suicide, let's call things what they are, right? That's part of the reason we're here, is hard. So, and it's been a long time, and I still think about him a lot, and it impacted my life a lot. What is perhaps something people don't talk about that often, I don't know for sure, because I don't hear most conversations, but those that I hear, is that I was in my mid 20s, And after I learned about his death, grief is a weird thing. And my life kind of went on. You know, I missed him. Yeah, I missed him terribly. And I thought about him all the time. And I stayed in touch with his family. And he would be, you know, I actually have a story, a sort of crafted story about this. I'm sort of pulling that from that he would visit me in my dreams at night, which is probably somewhat common. But things go on and you live your life and you have a job to go to and you have other commitments and you get back to it. And that's what happened until it didn't. So maybe that'll be another part of our conversation. Yeah.
So when he visited you in your dreams,
mm-hmm.
Was there a message? Would he just a cameo?
Yeah, it felt more like a cameo. It felt like, hey, I'm still around. I miss you. You know, dreams are weird. They're just fuzzy sometimes. They don't always make sense. And somebody's in a place where you wouldn't typically. So it was just good to see him. It was good to hear his laugh. It was good to see his face. It was good to hang with my brother, you know? So yeah, I would sometimes look forward to sleeping for that reason.
He was a police officer, correct?
Yeah, he was a cop in New York City police officer. So that means he had a gun. And we know what that can lead to sometimes. It's a very deadly weapon.
Right. And we know it's a profession that is vulnerable to suicide.
It's vulnerable to suicide. And at least then, and I think things have changed some, and I don't know much. I can't speak really about this, but at that time, I think it wasn't something you're supposed to talk about if you were suffering, if you were going through problems. I think it was something that if you did, there were things available for you, but it would affect your career. So what do? Do you talk about it? Do you suck it up? Do you go, and a lot of people suck it up, and it sometimes doesn't always work out well when you do that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's a huge trade-off for law enforcement, military folks.
Right.
They get help. There's a huge price tag. Good point.
Yep. Tough choice to make.
Yeah. So what did Jimmy inspire you to do later, about give or take 20 years later?
Yeah. So at Jimmy's 20-year anniversary, I just felt at his 10-year anniversary, the only thing I felt compelled to do was reach out to his parents, who I had sort of stopped communicating with. And I did. And we caught up. And then again, time goes on. And at the 20-year anniversary, and now I'm living in North Carolina for a while, I was more involved with theater and performance and storytelling and all these things. So I wrote this play, a one-person show, about our life together, about our relationship, his death, and everything changed for me. We might have to go back a tiny bit when I got sick. Part of the play wasn't just about Jimmy and our life and his death, but it was about me and how after several years after his death, I started to get sick with something that's yet to be diagnosed, but it was this, so I guess it's like an intermittent or episodic, I don't know the right words to describe it, come and go. And it was taking a massive toll on my life. And it was at that point, after dealing with that for some time, that I started to think about, like, I don't think I can be here anymore. This isn't going to work out. You know, this is taking too much of a toll. I'm in too much pain. And that is when things really changed for me in thinking back to his death and how I could not know then. And I don't really beat myself up over this, but I could know then what I later learned of what that kind of pain can do to somebody. Once you start thinking about not being here, you're in a different space. And I think back to our conversations, particularly towards the end. And if he was in that kind of space, and presumably he was, like, I had no idea, you know? And so one of the things at his anniversary, I wanted to just start talking more about it. And I chose a one-person show, but it also led to other things, which I think we'll talk a little bit more about in terms of speaking about these things and talking and writing stories and creating groups that just have honest conversations about this stuff. Because for me, that's the most I can do. And there's a lot of things I'm aware that I cannot do to help. I just can't. I can't write you a prescription. I'm not allowed to do it. And yeah, I mean, I'm not allowed to do it and I wouldn't know what I'm doing. Right. And there's all sorts of
upon.
Can't do it. All sorts of other things I cannot do to help. But one of the things I have found is just creating spaces. I shouldn't say just, because it sounds like it's minimizing it, and I shouldn't do that. But like you're doing here and NAMI does, and what I've tried to do is just let's talk about it in a space that's safe. And if nothing else, I think that's a contribution. I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can be life-changing. Just letting someone be comfortable in their skin, giving them permission to feel what they feel, be who they are.
I wonder why, as a big question here, I wonder why we don't do that very often. Like, why isn't that a class in school? Like, you got math, history, literacy, science, and then that other, we have to come up with a name for it. That should be the other one, starting when you're young.
Yeah, although one word that came to my mind was communication, but it's like authentic communication.
Yeah, it's like a subset, right?
Right.
Because communication will often like teach you how to persuade, which is great. It's a good skill.
Yeah.
But just holding that space and letting someone talk and feel what they want to feel.
Yeah, I see the word in the chat box, connection. One thought that I had too was like boundary removal.
We could play with their names. I'd love it. Yeah.
One of the things that was really touching when I listened to your story was the last time you saw Jimmy, and you were home from being abroad and you couldn't reach him. What happened there?
Well, Jimmy was a guy. He was the only guy in my life ever, because I was not a popular guy, where he was my guy. I would come back. Jimmy mostly stayed in New York, lived in New York, hung out in New York, and I would leave. I lived in Atlanta. Went to different countries. Come back to New York, me and Jimmy, 100% all the time. And and I never had a friend like that. I was blessed to have a friend like that. Like, I'm back, we're hanging out. I'd been in Japan for about a year. When I came back and I was letting him know, hey, I'm going to be back. Didn't really hear much from him. Came back. I was there for about 2 weeks. I was there for a wedding, and he just disappeared. Didn't let me know what was going on. No idea. And at the time I was really angry. Like, why are you like, I was upset. I was hurt. I haven't seen you in a year. Why are you not calling me back? Why are we not hanging out? And I knew that he was busy. I mean, he's a police officer and he had other obligations and he had a girlfriend at the time. But on the night before I went back to Japan, he did come over to my home where I grew up, and we were watching a VHS tape that I made of my life in Tokyo. And he was very much not himself, and he was falling asleep on my couch. And I remember thinking, why are you I was angry. I was upset. And again, so I going back to what I said a little earlier of like, now I think back to the pain he was in. And of course, and I don't really beat myself up over feeling the way I felt. Right. But the lens is completely different, because I can't say I've been in his shoes. I wouldn't make that statement, but I've been in a lot of pain where doing your best to make it to your buddy's house, but not quite being able to do it and falling asleep on their couch makes sense to me. I've been in similar spots, changed everything, but I don't know. How do you understand that without going through that? I don't know, but I did. And it really just changed the way I looked at his life. And I think the narrative around suicide that I hear often, because I do spend time in this space, is we don't talk about the courage and the strength it takes to sometimes stay alive. We talk a lot about the death, and we talk a lot about other things that aren't particularly kind always. And again, I'm not telling anybody how to feel here. What I do know is we don't spend a lot of time talking about the strength it takes for some people to stay alive. We will talk often about how amazingly courageous and hardworking someone is when they've climbed the corporate ladder, or they've trained really hard for that marathon. Good for you. That's amazing. Legit. I don't hear the conversation that often about how someone's busting their ass to get out of bed and just get to work with those thoughts in their minds and the pain they're in. So that's a conversation I like to have a little more often. And that's the conversation. That's what I think about with his life then. And I don't know how long that was. Was it a week? Was it a month? Was it a year? Was it going back all the way to when he left college and disappeared? I don't know. It's a game changer though. It just, the lens is completely different. So I had that conversation with him our very last night. I asked him to come to Japan because I was doing what we all do. And there's no judgments here. I want to fix it. Yeah. Here's an idea. I got an idea, Jimmy. Come to Japan with me. You know, it was fun at the time. If you spoke English, get your job teaching English, easy. Make some good money, easy. Meet some girls, fun. Why not, right? Fun. We're guys. We're single. And I remember him being very kind and polite. And yeah, I'll think about it, you know. I think back, and of course he wasn't thinking about it. He was probably thinking about taking his life as we stood on my driveway, you know. And he did. He did do it. So
it wasn't much longer after that.
No, not at all. I mean, memory serves me, it was probably less than a week. It was that close. Yeah. And so, you know, we don't get to know what people are thinking typically, but we can assume that it was a lot of darkness and a lot of pain.
Yeah. I remember as a young person really not understanding suicide before I had, you know, got into any deep waters myself. And someone said to me, if your hand was stuck in a furnace, a burning furnace, would you want to pull it out? And that did it for me. That image, that made sense to me. Definitely seeing some supportive comments in the chat from Bree, our volunteer, agreeing with your statements, Sean, about the strength it takes to survive and how that's not recognized. Yeah. From Nancy, I am a co-facilitator of a surviving, striving, and thriving support group online. Nancy at hope-group.org. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy.
And all right. So moving right along, you've got a couple of podcasts that were inspired partly by Jimmy, and tell us about that.
Sure. Right when we locked down, I started a group that was just, hey, we are all going through this thing. I'm going to do a Facebook Live and let's just talk about it. And I had been involved in some story stuff, personal narrative stories. So if you follow like The Moth, they're like the big fish.
Love it.
Yeah, like that kind of stuff. I was really getting more and more involved in that. And just after we locked down, I started a group that sort of blew up and got really big. And just, hey, let's just share our stories, whatever we're going through. But that kind of led to other things in the world of story. Started a podcast just about story. You know, I called it Grit, True Stories That Matter because it might sound like a little snob, but I just think some stories matter a little more than others. And I wanted to create a space for people to craft and tell those stories and get helpful and useful feedback, constructive feedback. And we've been able to do that. And that's on the podcast. And that's also, you know, in groups. And you've been, I think, to a couple of our events. We have different kinds of story events. Some of them are like these little stories called 99-second stories. And some of them are your more standard stories, like 5 to 10 minutes. And we've got these other formats. So that's been life-changing and a lot of fun. And in July of last year, I started a project that I had been thinking about doing for some time called Suicide Noted. And that is a podcast with a very clear mission. It's very straightforward. I talk with suicide attempt survivors. That's all I do. Most of that is me not talking and letting them talk. And I am now, I think, on episode number 80. And I share that because I'm proud of not quitting. I'm proud that people trust me to join me and to share some of these things that, you know, we just don't talk much about it. And so they have a lot of courage to come on and let me ask those questions and share those difficult things. And we've got listeners. We've got more and more listeners. And I think the people that find the podcast need to hear it. And I'm glad there's just not a lot of stuff out there like that. I don't know. Tell me if you found stuff like that. There's not much.
I have not. I listened to one episode with Amy, who is a therapist,
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really interesting perspective, that the position that a therapist is in, not unlike the police and the military, where it can be difficult to get help. There's a whole different dynamic.
Yeah, yeah. For sure. For sure. That was actually, I can say this, I think she'd be fine with it. She was a little nervous about that for understandable reasons, you know? I think she says it in our talk.
Right.
But she still did it, which I think is the admirable thing. If she's, if she felt comfortable, which I think she did.
Very courageous. And again, the kind of courage that might not get recognized, might not get the accolades that traditional heroic acts would get. But
different kind of heroism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So amazing conversations happening on Sean's podcast, and they are available on Facebook. Where are they available? Is a question in the chat box. And we've got some links that we can post that will connect you with Sean's awesome projects.
I think I gave you Facebook pages, but if you look in there, you will see links to projects, including the podcasts.
Sean is not hard to find online, which is a good thing. That's a good thing.
we gotta play the game, right? Gotta play the game. Internet.
Well, and you're reaching people where they are too, which is really important. So I remember the first time I listened to a grit storytelling session through Meetup. It was in September, and I was just having an off day. I couldn't figure out what to do with myself. I was sort of resting in bed most of the day. And I thought, well, this is something that will, just talk to other people who are struggling, or listen, really is what I did, is listen to other people who are struggling. So it was very helpful to me.
Good. I'm really glad that you came to that.
I was too. So you have a list of things people do that they think are helpful. What's that look like?
All right. Well, to some context, I've somehow came up with this list. I started with one thing, and then I was like, well, people do this other thing. The context is in conversation. This is just about conversation, that people, presumably well-intentioned, because the reality is, if you're not well-intentioned, I'm not a guy that you should be talking to. You just need somebody else to talk to. I'm not your guy. If you're not well-intentioned, somebody else can help. These people, I think there's a handful of things that people do that are well-intentioned, and they may not realize are not helping somebody who's in some kind of pain. They don't need to be suicidal here, just pain, even having a crappy day, that we do. And in a moment, I'm going to tell you what I think these things are. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too. And they're not helpful. They're not useful, and they might often be harmful. So number one, and there's no real order here. Number one, everybody's dealt with this, and I'm sure most people who are hearing this have probably done it. They may not want to admit it, is we fix, right?
Yeah.
And here's the thing. I know a lot of people who get paid a lot of money in their life to be really good fixers. So it's really hard to turn that off. But I would say that most of the time people actually are not talking with you. Plumbers, yes. They're not talking to you to get your ideas on these solutions. I'll go down the list, and then I can expand if you want or not. Here are some other things people do. They pontificate. They tell you about the world, and you're not asking about the world, because if you were, you would say, tell me about the world. Number three, we play doctor and we diagnose. And it doesn't always look like I think that you have bipolar, or I think you're dealing with anxiety. We just try to figure out what's going on. And again, I think most people mean well, but the question is, are you being helpful? Are you creating a space for someone to talk, which is most of the time what they need? We compare, which sometimes can be, I think, a helpful thing. Like if I'm equating an experience I had that was really hard, that might, I'm feeling a little less alone. But comparing to somebody else and saying, well, it wasn't so bad for them. So is that helpful?
Right.
Couple others, and then I'll stop yapping. We minimize, which in a sense, all of these do that, right? At least you're not such and such, or it's not that big of a deal. And I think I know why most people do that. And I would say that most of you are not being helpful. And if you want to be helpful, there are some other things that you can consider doing that will create a space for people to feel a little better. That's my jam. I mean, I'm not going to help. I don't have all the answers here. I'm just like, hey, someone feels crappy. Can we help them feel a little less crappy? I mean, but you know what? I'm not a father. So if I had a child, I might do those things. I understand the impulse. Your job is to protect, right? Your job is to do at all costs. So no judgments on people if they're doing those things. Without a kid, I mean, it's easy for me to say this stuff, but it's just things I've experienced anecdotally based on a lot of conversations and some research that, yeah.
Yeah. So comment from Gary in the chat box. I think this is an example. Spend more time with the Lord. That will take your sadness away. Wow.
Oh, that was an example of what not to do?
Yes.
I would agree with that comment that might not. Now, here's the thing. I've got a friend and she tells me when I'm down, I want you to tell me things are going to be okay. You know what I do? I tell her things are going to be okay. She told me what to do. Yep. In that case, that's fine. Someone made it very clear. Right. Here's something that'll make me feel better. But if you don't have that information, and usually we don't.
Right.
There's other things you can do. And they're not that complicated. They're not. I promise that you don't have to do those things and you can really help. Right? And so I start with don't do this stuff. It's probably not the greatest way to start that conversation. Don't do this, don't do that, because people are going to tune out. But I think we do it a lot.
Yeah. And as you were giving those examples, your list, it kept occurring to me that what most people want when they're struggling is just to feel heard.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that helps people feel that way when you do those things. Actually, I do know it doesn't.
Exactly.
And here's the great part about not doing those things, and then just mostly what you have to do is just not say anything. That's the real aha. Because if somebody wants to feel heard, well, then just do your best. I shouldn't say just. Try to create a space for them to feel heard. And I know for sure you cannot do that if your mouth is open and words are coming out. Can't do it. It's not possible.
Right. And so one of the stories you've told is about a resident advisor, I assume in a dorm in college, who really helped you when you needed to talk. Good.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good example of what to do.
Yeah. Freshman year of college, struggling. She said, my door is open. You know, I don't remember the days and the times, but this is like my time to talk. If you want to talk, I didn't even know what she meant. I was like, all right. Oh man, I gotta talk to somebody. Nobody's around. Actually, it might have been around with the Jimmy stuff, but I don't really remember the exact detail. But I remember knocking on her door. She said, come in. I started talking and she said nothing. And it was awkward. Like, it was like legitimately awkward. I'm thinking like, why aren't you saying anything? I might have even said that. Like, why aren't you saying anything? She's like, I want to hear what you're going through. I want to hear. I would just want to hear what you have to say and what's up. And I just kept talking. And like, I think like 20 minutes went by. I'm like, man, that was fast. And I just probably didn't have people to talk to.
Right.
Like, I had a couple buddies who was like, oh, we'll talk about girls. We'll talk about drinking, stupid stuff. But just to be clear, I didn't call girls stupid. I'm just saying that just to be clear, it wasn't the stuff that I needed to talk to her about. It was other stuff. And I think if I was in that room for 20 or 25 minutes, she might've said 20 words. And it was eye-opening. Look, I didn't have this epiphany where I then said, you know what, I'm going to go and I'm going to be a therapist. Like, it wasn't that. But I remember it very, very clearly of the power of simply letting somebody sort of say what they need to say. And I think more times than not, people have a lot more to say than you're letting them say. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Like, a lot more.
Yeah, because we're always in a hurry. I'm always thinking about, this is a great conversation, but I've got to get back to my task, or I have to get to work, or I have to walk my dog.
And what does that look like? Often those things that I suggest you don't do, right? Fixing and the diagnosing and the comparing. And here's the big thing, the real stakes thing here is a couple things, if I may share. One, if you really want to help somebody out and some of that's like informational, though Google's a very powerful thing that most people know how to access. If it's informational, you got to hear what's going on to get the information. And you're probably not going to do that in 18 seconds. Like you're just not. Two, you're building trust. And three, and there's only three, there's going to come when someone's going to stop talking, but they're probably not going to say, you know what? You always try, they might do this, but you always try to fix my situation or fix me. You're always telling me what to do. You're always telling me how to feel. And I don't feel, sure, some people might do that. You know what they're more than likely going to do? They're just going to stop talking to you about stuff they need to talk about. And if you're in their life, like you're a parent or a sibling or a friend, they're going to say, oh, no, things are fine.
Exactly.
And that's when it gets very dangerous. I don't trust you anymore to talk to you. Things are fine. I'll be fine. I'm okay. I'm doing the best I can. The platitudes, right? Okay. And then we have major problems. Here's what I say, and this may not go over very well. I say this on the Suicide Noted podcast sometimes. Don't be the last person someone speaks to. And it's crappy to hear, and maybe it's a little unfair of me to do that. Just if you create a space for someone, that's what they need. That's what they need. And then here's the beautiful thing. Then after all that, you want to say, oh, I have a great doctor you might want to talk to. Okay. Oh, I have this idea that really helped me if you're open to hearing it. Okay. After. Game changer.
That's a very powerful statement. And I think it takes a powerful statement to sort of cut through the noise, cut through the clutter, cut through our collective numbness.
Yeah. I mean, again, and I think most people, certainly people that are here, which might be a little bit of an echo chamber, right? Because people here are already in it. They already kind of get it. I don't necessarily know how to reach people who don't get it. I don't. Please tell me. We all mean well. We all want people to feel better. We want people not to be in pain so that they can do things in their lives that bring them the things we all want, which is presumably some connection and meaning and joy and fill in the blanks with a bunch of other words. But that's really hard to do when you're in pain. Any kind of pain, right? I don't mean just physical pain.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the part of your story about having an illness that was not diagnosable and not being believed, that struck a chord with me, that invalidation, that would be incredibly difficult. And
yeah.
And I think the opposite of that is what people are looking for. In NAMI family to family class, we talk about reflective listening, and it's not really agreeing or disagreeing with what the person says. It's just honoring their emotions. Right. I really hear your frustration. I really hear your suffering and your pain. I can see that you're going through that.
Yeah. It's so powerful. It's so powerful, my case might be a little different just because, look, I was going mostly to doctors, and you could argue doctors, their primary role is to come up with a solution, right? Or a diagnosis. It's not necessarily to have great bedside manner. You could argue that. But most of them didn't. They kind of didn't believe me. I got the sense, and I can tell you I was not lying. And I can tell you I was not embellishing. If anything, I was the opposite. And no, they don't have all the answers. And that's got to be okay. It's got to be okay because they don't. So you did your job. You did the best you could. And you can say, I believe you. I want to help you. And let's see what we can do moving forward. I mean, that would feel a lot better than some of the stuff. I've got no doubt I'm sure most people have dealt with that at some point. If they had any kind of condition that was immediately diagnosable. But even if it was, we treat people who are in pain and sometimes in ways that are just, I just scratch my head. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. A comment in the chat box, which is coming to mind. I think we give advice or don't believe or whatever because we can't deal with the subject or the fear. Yeah.
Right. Or yet we deny it. Don't believe it.
Exactly.
I tell you I'm depressed and you say, you're not depressed. I just told you. I literally just told you I'm depressed. Why would you say I'm not depressed? You know, and that's not that uncommon of a kind of conversation. It happens. I don't know where the awkwardness is born or how to deal with that. So I'm completely okay with awkwardness in creating it and hearing it. People that feel, we talked a little bit about this before we went on. I don't know what to say to people. If you're feeling really awkward, I can only hope that maybe try not to feel awkward. Does that even work? What would you say to somebody who's feeling really awkward? If I say, hey, I'm really having some dark thoughts, really bad, and you feel awkward, I don't know what to say to you. Know, what would somebody say to you that might help you feel less awkward? Is there an answer there?
Well, I think that has to do with being prepared to be in that space with someone. So there are a lot of different answers. If I'm having my own emotional trouble and my style is such that I'm not even aware I'm having trouble.
Right.
Then that awkwardness, I don't know how you fix that.
I don't either. Yeah.
But training, suicide prevention training, or just, training people that it does sound scary when someone is having thoughts of suicide and they tell you about it. It does sound scary when someone says I'm having dark thoughts, but 9 out of 10 times, all they want to do is talk and say that. You don't have to.
I think it's much more than 9. I think it's 9 point something, very high out of 10.
Oh, I accept that.
Yeah. I would throw out there, I'd suggest it's very rare that you're going to be in a situation where someone's literally about to kill themselves. Right? Like they're talking about it, maybe a different conversation if they have a gun in their hand or they're actually at a bridge ready to jump. They're bringing something up. I promise you they want to be heard. If you have the ability, and you're right, some of it is practice. When some of the things that you do at NAMI allow people to practice, that will help. There's probably some other stuff. And again, as a parent, I don't know what that's like. I don't know how I'd respond if my kid was saying that. I might not be such a great listener all of a sudden, right? It's my kid. I do want to say I met the guy who, I don't know his role. He was at the Golden Gate Bridge. He's all over YouTube and TED. He was the guy that talked the people off. I met him at a conference, right? I said, what do you say to them? What do you do? It was just about everything we're talking about here. Nothing was really different. And they were about to do it. If that's how he approached it, which is essentially listening, then you can absolutely apply that to the people in your life. He was doing that with people who are on a ledge. That is not my milieu. I am not suggesting what to do. I don't know, but I'm telling you that's what he did. They just wanted to be heard. And that's what he did. That's what he offered them. And he didn't save everyone. He didn't get, and that's another conversation and a larger conversation of, are we ever going to get to a point where suicide just doesn't happen at all? Or can we just do our best to reduce it and prevent it and help people just have better, or just whatever their lives need to be so they don't even feel that way? But that's complicated.
I think the work that you're doing, Sean, and the conversation we're having tonight opens the door for and reduces the fear. Comment in the chat from Nancy, that's why we have to be able to talk about this openly and without fear. I was lucky enough to take a mental health first aid class, and one of the things they have you do is practice saying the words, are you having thoughts of suicide?
Yeah.
So that you can say it and get that awkwardness out of your system, because it is just saying it. I was choking on the words the first time, but I was. But like you say, after a time, I realized that it's just, you can enter that space without so much fear. It's practice, it's getting desensitized and realizing that people just need to discharge that emotion. They need to feel heard. They need to feel like they matter to somebody.
Absolutely. When it was a shift for me, and I can really only speak for me, when I realized when people are in pain, and just to be clear, I use that sort of very broadly. The greatest gift I can typically give them is what we're talking about. When I was very clear that that's actually the great, and sometimes they'll say other things and it makes it clear that, oh no, actually we want something else. I want you to drive me somewhere. I'll drive you somewhere, right? But without that, if that's the gift I can give, that's my default. My default is not fixing or pontificating or diagnosing or the list. My default is I'm going to assume what you need most is that. And I think that's a better starting point. You know, I really do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Comment in the chat. It is scary when your child talks about suicide with you. It's worse if she doesn't.
Yeah.
That is a NAMI perspective if I've ever heard one.
That is powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So either way, someone's going to be thinking what they're thinking. The question is, do you want to be part of that conversation with the person or not? Mm-hmm. But you not going there doesn't change what they're maybe thinking. It doesn't change that. Tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, I want to hear if people disagree. I also want to call out to the men. I don't know how many men are on this call here. Men in particular. I don't know if there's a real difference between how women and men do this stuff. I do know a lot of guys who look like me, my age, yada, yada. We suck at this, guys. We got to get better. We just do. We're not good at it. We're not taught it. I get it. I'm not judging. Let's get a little better at this. I didn't mean to be mean. You don't suck at it. I know you're trying. No, sorry, Gary. You're right. Gary, you work at NAMI. I'm sure you're probably not like a lot of men, but hey man, I mean, yeah, I take back my mean comments. I just want people to get a little better at this stuff so we can help people feel better, you know?
Keeping it real with Sean Wellington.
Keeping it real.
All right. So really good insights in people's comments. You have to put your personal beliefs on the shelf, keep it in check when you're being there for someone, it's about them and not you. So thank you for that wisdom, Nancy. Really good stuff there. And that can be difficult. Maybe for me, faith is a big part of the solution, but it's not for everyone. And I have to know that. Or meditation or walking, whatever it is that's your thing. It may not be another person's thing.
Right.
So you've given a lot of compelling talks online, as I mentioned, and one focuses on loneliness. We'll be showing a brief snippet in a few minutes here.
Oh, really? Okay. All right.
Oh, yeah. Very cool. What made you choose that topic?
Because I'm lonely. And I think a lot of people are lonely. And I think that's actually under-discussed and very stigmatized. Very stigmatized. More than a lot of other subjects that might fall under the sort of umbrella of mental health. And let's put an addiction in there too. The tough stuff.
Sure.
I used to have a problem with drugs. I will tell you much quicker that I was an addict or I had a drinking problem than I will tell you that I'm lonely. Much quicker. I don't know why that is, but loneliness is not something people are quick to talk about. And so if you hear my stories, I'd say every other story I took, well, maybe not every other, they often have that theme. Sometimes people start rolling their life. Here Sean goes again with another loneliness story. I'm like, yeah, because more people are going to hear it. And my goal is, can I curse?
Sure.
Okay. Sorry. Well, the whole thing with Suicide Noted and with Grit, really, the big thing is helping people feel less shitty. That's my curse word. And less alone. Period. Done. If I've done that, good. Complete. I'm good to go. So of course I'm going to share stories about me feeling lonely, because when I do it, maybe somebody hearing that says, I'm not alone. Because I've been on the other end where I heard someone say, oh my God, he went through that. I went through that. I'm not alone. I feel, even if it's a tiny smidge better, it's better. It's lighter. The feeling of going through something alone is the shittiest feeling in the world. It just is. That's in our DNA. Even if you tell me like, oh, I'm a loner, I don't believe you. I kind of don't believe you. I just think you're faking it well. It might be true. I don't know. So yeah, I'm a lonely guy. I'm single. I struggle with relationships, all kinds, family, friendships, romantic. But I'm not really coming from a place of wanting pity. I'm coming from a place of like, hey, this is the part of the human condition. At least it's my experience. Maybe you're there too. Let's talk about it. And so the talk that I think, or part of the talk that you might show in a few moments, is really geared towards college kids, younger, certainly younger than I am. And because there were some studies that I read, and then I sort of really researched it about how this epidemic almost of loneliness and the damage that it does to us, but it's very hard to see. I think I make that talk is a couple years old now, but I think I made an analogy to smoking cigarettes and the damage that loneliness can do. And it's a little bit harder to really measure, right, than the physical effects of a cigarette, but it is very damaging. It is very damaging. And I, again, can't say, well, just go make friends. Yeah, duh. Really? Thanks for the advice, right? But just creating a space for someone to maybe hear somebody who's going through something, and then maybe they want to talk a little bit. That's about all I can offer. That's I'm staying in my lane, right? And then maybe there'll be some positive movement. Maybe. Yeah. I don't think these are quick fixes, but some people will disagree with me. It's how I approach it.
I had a friend who used to joke about giving advice to insomniacs. You just need a good night's sleep.
No shit. Thank you. Right. Again, there's a myth, at least I feel like people think what others need is information. It's usually not what people need. They're having trouble applying the information in their lives. If you want to help them do that, that might be a real gift. Most people know that there are doctors that can. Now, look, there might be a kid out there who doesn't know about therapy. By all means, introduce him to the idea of therapy, or her. I'm not saying there's no place for that. Most people know what's out there. I mean, if you're alive in 2021 with Google and social media, it's pretty easy to find stuff. What people are having a hard time doing is applying it. And right?
That's an excellent point.
They can't do it. When you tell me that stuff, all you're doing is reminding me of something I already know that I can't do.
And closing the door further on that feeling of being heard. Because you're right, there's no scarcity of information in our world. The scarcity is connection and love and acceptance.
And remember, that person, you keep doing that. I know I sound a little threatening here. I don't mean to. You keep doing this, you're going to stop coming to you. Why would they keep coming to somebody who keeps saying, do this, do that? You shouldn't feel this way. Life is like a box of chocolates. Leave me alone with your chocolates. I don't need your platitudes. How many more of that do I want? I don't want to hear that. What I want you to do is just
right. That's you are so courageous, Sean. There are a lot of people who can talk about a lot of things, but you're right about loneliness. A lot of what you said resonated with me just now and in the video. And I'm actually thinking, I don't even know if I want to handle this topic because I don't want to I don't want to tip my hand. But it's so common, and it is a tough thing.
It's common.
Right.
And I'm coming from a place of actually like living alone. There's also a big part of that conversation of people feeling lonely in relationships, where from the outside people would never. So it's a big deal.
That's a good point. Yeah.
It's a big thing. So let's talk about it. Right. I also have to be okay, just like with suicide. just like with suicide, I have to be okay with talking about it, knowing that it may not solve your problem. Even you're going to leave this conversation and still feel lonely. And it's possible you're going to feel lonely for the rest of your life. I have to be okay with that possibility. It is possible that I want to be there for you when you're in a lot of pain. And it's possible that you're going to choose to take your life sometime. It's possible. I have to be okay with that. If I'm not okay with that, I don't think I can create a space for you to feel comfortable sharing. I don't.
Right. Because you're not accepting them completely.
It's a tough spot to be in. And that's my take.
It is.
I think some people will see it differently, but that's my take on it. And it helps me. It helps me say, all right, honor where they are. Keep it real. And mostly don't talk and let them talk. That's like 90% of it.
That is indeed 90% of it.
It's a lot.
All right. We're going to shift here and show our video of the week. And then we'll get to questions from you, members of our virtual studio audience and Facebook friends. Before we do that, I want to give a big shout out to the folks working behind the scenes. Thank you so much to work study student from St. Aug's, Bria Motley on chat, and Executive Director Gary Kreitz on Facebook. Thank you for always being there. And thanks so much to Sean for spending your evening with us. All right. So now we are going to check out this powerful, the very start of this powerful video. You can find this again online and listen to the whole thing.
Oh no, is this me?
This is you. Bald and Bold. That's the title of it. Bald and Bold.
All right.
All right. Remember, you're brave.
Loneliness is like getting punched in the face by a stranger. Releases just as much cortisol every day. And what does that do to your body? What does that do to your health, physical or non-physical? People are dying to be heard.
So when I think about...
I'm actually going to stop it right there. So yeah, I think we're being very consistent with our messaging tonight.
People are dying to be heard. Yeah.
Absolutely.
The truth.
Yeah. So now we're going to have some questions from our folks out here. If you're newer to Zoom, you can click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, type up your question. It will magically be delivered to Sean and myself. All right. So from Gary, you deal with such tough, draining subjects. How do you keep your own emotional energy up in the midst of the pain you are hearing so often?
Wow. Probably not going to surprise you. I think I have an unpopular or uncommon response. I kind of think I'm put on earth to do it. It's not draining. It's the opposite of draining for me, which might sound a little weird. Like, why are you getting excited or up hearing other people's pain? I'm not. It's just, I know how much it's needed. And so I do it. And so Gary, I do what other people do. I imagine, I do my swimming and I go for a walk and I try to get 8 hours sleep. I don't know. I just seem to be able to do it. Not a sexy answer, I know.
It's an authentic answer. We'll take it.
That's my answer.
For me, if I think of that, because I don't feel drained by difficult topics oftentimes. I think if you live with a little bit of psychic pain or a lot of psychic pain anyways, that's where you're comfortable. It's acknowledging and validating and a little bit of a pressure valve going on.
I like that, psychic pain. Also, I spend a lot of time in the world of story. It's not just hearing people's pain. And remember, like for the Suicide Noted podcast, there is a lot of pain. There's also a lot of people talking about how they overcame their pain, how they're dealing with their lives now, how they're recovering, how some of them are thriving. In the world of story, it's more creative. So it's not just, it's the craft of the story and the things that make up a story that make it engaging or relatable. So there's a creativity to that energy, which I find kind of pretty cool. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because you can do something with it. You can do something with it. It doesn't just sit there. You can put it somewhere. And
that's a beautiful feeling, to create something beautiful from something devastating.
And you know what's even more beautiful or amazing feeling, at least for me and others that I've dealt with? sharing it, and then having people be like, thank you. That's powerful.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Yeah.
Stuff. From Justin on Facebook, is there more that we can do in those times when people are the most in need?
I think Justin's referring to more than some of the words that I said about basically holding space. Man, I'm always tempted to give the right answer. And then I'm like, no, just give your answer. My answer is no. That's the most you can do. Because if you do that, it will lead to other things that you may be able to do for somebody. A lot of things. If you don't do that, you close it off. I'm curious to see what you think about this, Peg. I mean, there's a lot of like, it depends, case by case. And so, sure, I think that the greatest gift you can give anybody is the stuff that we talked about. Beyond that, it's case by case, right? So if somebody obviously needs their arm fixed because it's broken, take them to the doctor. I mean, some pretty obvious stuff here. And I know Justin's probably not referring to those moments, but in my world, do that other thing first. And then please, I'm going to give you my contact information. If that's not enough, shoot me a message. I want to know, but do that first. Don't skip that step.
There you go. My comment to Justin, I think you're right, Sean. In essence, the best thing to do is to listen and to be present with someone to the best of your ability. And remember that maybe you're planting a seed, maybe they aren't comfortable sharing, but just the fact that you're willing could be huge. There are also some valuable free trainings through NAMI. I can't recommend highly enough the mental health first aid class. Sometimes those are free. The Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disability and Substance Use Services is right now offering free mental health first aid classes. Contact us at NAMI North Carolina. If someone could put the helpline information there, please, we can connect you with that. And so some knowledge and education is also very helpful.
100%.
Excellent question.
I think the resources are very, very valuable. And for me, I don't want people to skip. I have this idea that we tend to outsource empathy, and you don't need to, they can get it from those other places and learn things from NAMI and elsewhere, and they should. I want you to. And you can listen and be present for somebody. And please.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, hey, if you can't do that, if you're not available, suggesting resources, sure, by all means.
No, I mean the training for we who will listen.
Yeah.
The training so that, so we can practice reflective listening.
I missed
so
that.
We can practice that question. I probably wasn't clear. Are you having thoughts of suicide? Just learning to feel equipped to go into those deeper waters.
Yeah, good point. I can count on one hand how many people I have in my life who, when I share something with them, they legitimately are present and listening. And if I only have 5 or fewer, most people, I'm guessing, only have 5 or fewer. If you can give that to somebody, it is a gift is such an understatement to what you provide for somebody. When you just let them do what they need to do and say what they need to say and get it out and just hold space. It's like oxygen. It is. It's like oxygen. And there's kind of a cool thing is that there's a sort of pay it forward effect. I don't know if that's the right way to frame it. If you do that for somebody, I think you increase the odds that they do that for somebody. It's like a modeling thing, right? And so I'm all on, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Next question from Anonymous. Do you ever work with people who are imminently suicidal? What do you do?
Interesting question. For a couple of years, I was a crisis text line counselor, 741-741. If there's 4 questions that you ask, right? Gauging if someone's suicidal. And in that case, I had no choice but to move them to somebody else. It was out. Of the people that I talked to for the Suicide Noted podcast, it's somewhat of a self-selected audience. They're people that want to talk about it, are able to talk about it. They have Wi-Fi, right? So they might not be, most of them I had 80 conversations so far. I always ask them if they think they'll try again. It's always a question I ask. Let's say about half of them say, maybe, yeah. I'd say a smaller percentage of them are planning something. I would say fewer than 10 have said, probably going to do it. And I've had a couple that said, I am going to do it. And I didn't know my role. That was one of the few times where I thought to myself, I don't know my legal and or moral place right now. Right? I think of myself mostly in the lens of probably closer to a journalist than anything else in that role. And I didn't know what to do. And I still don't know the right answer there. And I'm not even thinking about the law, just what's the right thing to do. And we had the conversation like I did with everybody. And I said, I don't want you to end your life. Can I help in any other way? And in no particular cases, they said no. And I honored that. What else could I have done? I don't know. So to answer your question, mostly I don't. And I think for the most part, if they were, I don't know what you mean by imminent. I would approach it the same way. I don't know if that's the right way, but that's probably how I would do it. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that answer. I was taught that there are a series of questions you ask if someone is suicidal.
Yep.
And they're standard, excuse me, across all the different trainings.
Right.
Are you having thoughts of suicide? Do you have a plan? Do you have a time frame? Do you have tools to enact the plan?
Right.
And if they keep answering yes, that raises the risk factor more and more. And you might get to a point where you say, I'm really very concerned about you. I need to call 911 right now, and I'll stay with you. Or can we call someone you know? Can we call your therapist? Something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been in support groups where I asked those questions, and the young man said, I know these questions.
Of course. Everybody. And they also know what happens when they answer those questions. And if they're honest about it and they are yes, they know what's going to happen.
Right.
And maybe that's not a conversation for today, but maybe they don't want that thing to happen. So they kind of lie. I would. I mean, so it's a tough spot. It's a really tough spot.
It is. Yeah. And we did lose that young man to suicide.
You did.
We did.
Yeah. There's a couple, I think there's one person I talked to for the podcast. I think he ended his life. I don't know for sure. I just saw his social media activity stop. And he was one of them that said, and he was one of the first ones I talked to. And he said, I don't want, this is another myth about suicide. I don't know if the word's myth, most people think about it for a long time. They're mostly not just in the moment. The act might be somewhat impulsive, but they've been thinking about it. He'd been thinking about it for years. He's tried. He knows exactly what his life is and isn't. He's tried everything. Who am I? Tough spot, right? And he did it. He was very clear. And I don't know what to say. I don't know. I got to be okay with not knowing too, right?
Yeah. Similar question that just came up. What is your feeling about physician-assisted suicide?
I think I can share just Sean's thoughts. This is by no means a reflection of my vocation or my training or research at all. I lean towards people have this right. They have a right to make this choice. And if they do, whether it should be done with a physician, it makes sense for it to be safe and moral. I absolutely understand the arguments against that. And I understand the arguments about someone saying, absolutely not, under no circumstances. I'm not advocating for or encouraging suicide in any way.
Of course. I
have met people who have suffered for a very, very long time. This is not they're not going through one particular bad moment. I just have a hard time getting in the way of it. I'm kind of not really answering your question because I don't have an answer. It's a tough one. I lean towards giving people choice, but I don't want that to be misinterpreted.
I hear you. As you were speaking, I was thinking, I'm glad I'm going to sit this one out.
And I'm like legitimately okay with saying, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. What I just know what it's like to be in pain for a really long time, you know? And so when I hear about it, it's not as if I judge harshly or say, I just can never understand. It's a tough spot. Yeah, it's a tough spot.
Indeed, it is. So in doing Suicide Noted and your grit events, what has, it seems like that could affect you personally a lot, or maybe there's a speaker who just really stood out. What are some of your impressions from doing that?
Now, can you ask me the question again in terms of impressions in terms of what?
How has it affected you personally, and are there any that really stand out?
Well, the two projects have in many ways saved my life. I mean, they've been absolute life-changing, game-changing, massive projects in terms of life-affirming and soul-enriching. That's the sort of meta big answer. The people, particularly with the story stuff that I'm drawn to, are always the stories that are the stuff we tend not to talk about, the difficult subjects, the vulnerability. I'm especially drawn to men who are expressing vulnerability because I'm not sure if they do it less, but it feels like maybe they shy away from it a bit more. And I'm a guy, so I see myself reflected in them a little bit more sometimes. And the people that actually, you know, and I'm like, this is a craft for me. So I get if you have an opportunity to tell a story on a stage that you're not going to do what I might do when I prepare a story. Like I'm doing it for many, 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 many hours, right? So yeah, I get that you're not doing that, but those stories that are crafted in a way where they're really engaging. I don't mean like cute, funny, oh my God, engaging, making silly jokes, but really understanding how to keep somebody's attention. Because if you don't, then we're not listening to your story. So how do you do that? How do you make something that feels unrelatable, relatable? It's doable sometimes. And so when I see the combination of vulnerability and craft, and there's several people in my world. Some of them are friends. Some of them I just know through this world, and I hear them speak or tell stories sometimes that they're the best. Love them. Love them. Does that answer your question? Was I?
It does.
Yeah.
And I think you're right about men. The gender norms make it more difficult to be vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. I think Bria's like my biggest fan. I love you. She said, great answer. You're a good speaker. I'm like, thanks, Bria. I don't feel that way at this moment. Yeah, men are, you know, I don't have to look at the most recent data, but I believe that it's either the number one, I want to be careful here, or the one that's growing the most of the demographics of suicide or suicide attempts. So men are almost always completed at a higher percentage because the methods that they use are different and they're more deadly. But I think if we look at the attempts, there's a few demographics, and I'm in one of them. Like I'm the guy for like, there's like three demographics that are really rising. One's like very young, one's like very old, and one's like dudes like me. I see that. I'm like, all right, guys, what's up? What are we doing? You know, can I help in any way? I don't know. Maybe if they see somebody that looks a little more like them, they're willing to talk. I don't know. I got to reach them. I got to find them.
I think you're on point. I think you're the guy.
Fine. I appreciate
we just got a Facebook notification. Okay. Sorry, from Facebook, is there an organization that you recommend for suicide attempt survivors? I've been looking for a group or organization solely for survivors, but all the ones I find are for family members. They refer to themselves as the survivors.
Mm-hmm. There are, right. So this is in the world of suicide, you've got suicide attempt survivors and suicide loss survivors, and they both call themselves survivors, and that's fine. Yeah. I've got my podcast, which is invites people on to, and Nancy just put something in there, so that might be a good resource as well. There are several Facebook groups. I'm not an active part of them, so I really can't talk about them, that are just for suicide attempt survivors. If you reach out to me, and I think there's a couple ways that you can reach out to me that we've put in the chat, I will share them with you. One of them is run by a friend and a suicide attempt survivor who's been on my podcast, and I trust, and I think she does a good job with the group. There are probably things that are in person or getting back to in person. And I'm in North Carolina. Everyone here is in North Carolina, right? Well, most of us. But there's not much, is there? There's not much.
Not like you'd think. Not for how many people we lose to suicide.
There's a lot for, mental health related, but specifically suicide. No. When I was writing that play, one of the sort of branches I went down, I started thinking about, what if there was like something similar to like a 12-step group for suicide attempt survivors, or someone contemplating. There actually were a couple that weren't really sanctioned by the 12-step. I don't understand how that whole organization works. I'm not part of it. But there have been people that after there was a suicide, like a 12 suicide survivors group, but the close one was like in Virginia. The other one was in like Tennessee. Like there's nothing in North Carolina. So I didn't find anything in North Carolina specifically for suicide attempt. A group I could go to and say, we're all going through this thing, the S word.
Right. I want to say this.
Yeah, sorry.
For folks who are watching a recording of this show later on and you can't see the chat, there's a woman named Nancy Johns who has put her email in the chat box several times. It's nancy@hope-group.org. That's nancy@hope-group.org. So if you're looking for that resource, she is available to you, and her message says, we are for suicide survivors or persons with suicidal ideation online. So please reach out to me if you'd like some help.
Does that include, I'm looking on her site now, so I'm just wondering if that also includes lost survivors. And I share that or ask that because I know sometimes you don't want to mix those groups. Those are difficult. So you can imagine why, like a mother loses her son and then somebody else is, and I don't know. I've thought about starting a group. I just don't think that I can do it. I think you have to have certain certifications or state sanctioned something. I can't just be a guy. Maybe I can. I don't know.
Let's talk.
There's some legal issues that I might run into. And I don't want to also go out of my lane. I think I'm in my lane and I don't know,
Well, this conversation has got me thinking. We do have peer programs at NAMI led by trained facilitators, and that was something we could specialize in. More information from Nancy that's very valuable. They have separate groups, as Sean suggested. It is a best practice. Nice. For attempt survivors and loss survivors. We do that at NAMI with family members and folks who have a mental health challenge. The needs are different, the perspective is different, and we don't want to create awkwardness in this situation. Nancy, we also have a group for ages 13 to 18. So Nancy really has this covered. Please reach out. Really good stuff. Nancy@hope-group.org. Sorry, cool. Sean, go ahead.
No. I was just wondering if she's in the triangle or because it's a Zoom, she can be anywhere, right? I'm just curious. I'm going to check out the website though when we get off. I'm curious.
Yeah, wonderful. So I had some questions we didn't quite get to. You spent 16 years teaching English in other parts of the world, and you learned that loneliness and depression are part of the human experience everywhere. How did that lesson reveal itself to you?
Well, I was at different places at different points in my life. So in my 20s, I was in Japan. 20s is your 20s, right? I spent some time when I was older in Saudi Arabia, in Argentina. These are places where I spent like a chunk of time, months. So you might be able to gauge that. I was mostly okay. And again, I was there as an English teacher, not as a mental health anything, just a guy. And I was going through stuff. I was going through my stuff. I think the way what I learned is people are in pain everywhere. Humans are humans. That was my experience. I think people mostly want the same stuff. I think a lot of people struggle. I think that doesn't matter where you are or what your culture's about, and there might be exceptions. I'm just my experience, right? I wasn't everywhere all the time. I do know, I remember having a very interesting conversation with somebody. I was volunteering in Tanzania, and we were talking about medication for depression. And I remember him legitimately not having a clue of what I was talking about. He didn't get it, didn't understand it. And I tried to explain it. Why would you need medication for depression? And I tried to explain. We very different cultures, very different worlds. Would never. And now part of that might have been that isn't available, so it's just not on their radar.
Yeah.
I remember that was one of the first times where someone was coming from such a different place. When I'm in Saudi Arabia, it's the center of Islam. There's a very strong faith that's going to dictate people to some degree, maybe how they feel, places they can go to get help. I think my main takeaway again, and this isn't some, wow, holy cow, you learned that when you were abroad, Sean. But here's what it is. People they struggle. Money doesn't make, look, we all know, like, I think most people would agree. There's a certain level of money that absolutely helps, right? You need to eat food. You need to be safe. You need some basics. Beyond that, almost every study shows it doesn't make a big difference.
Right.
Language doesn't make a difference. Your geography may make a little difference. These things matter. They add up. But I think people that was my take through my lens was, there are a lot of people who are struggling wherever I go. But that's my lens, right? That's my lens. Somebody else who's maybe happy-go-lucky, guess what? They might see happy-go-lucky. I don't know. I think I tend to sort of feel the pain a little bit quicker than maybe perhaps some other people. I'm like, oh, okay, you're in pain. So, yeah. I'm sure there are all kinds of very interesting studies that compare cultures and different times and groups and lifestyles, and they might be very informative. But my anecdotal experience from living it mostly is okay. Yeah, we're all in this thing, and it's hard.
Human condition.
Yeah, right.
So what gives you hope?
These conversations give me hope. The work that I'm doing right now, and I could have said this in the past with the teaching, but I can say it more earnestly now, gives me hope. I really enjoy it, and I think it's important work. And I don't know if I could have said that in the past. And I think somebody put in the chat, and I agree, and I'm not always good at it, but empathy and compassion. And if you ask certain people in my life, they'll say, nah, he's not very good at that. Right. So it's depending on, we have these versions of ourselves, right? And I don't know why. That gives me hope. I want to be better at that. Like that's an end in itself. Like compassion, it's not like a means to something, like most things. Like that's the end. That's the thing. You're good. So that's a goal I have. I no longer have hope of growing my hair back. It's gone. My hair is done. So that sucks. Yeah. I don't know.
That was one of my favorite things, your comment about Jimmy and his beautiful hair, and you had to get over, you had to get over hair envy.
Yeah. Yeah. Some people and there were a couple of people like, were you guys like more than friends? Because the way you talk about him is almost this like, And I was like, no. But guy had amazing hair. It's a very platonic friendship, trust me. But if you saw the guy's hair, you'd agree. And I didn't have that kind of hair. So I was like, oh, man. Gary wants to change the subject. Yeah, Gary. See, Gary, these are the moments when you want to lean into it. Lean in. No, I'm just playing. Gary, I'm sure there was a time in your life when you had a fantastic head of hair.
There's photographic evidence.
Yeah. It's a tough one. I know. I think you look good, Gary.
I agree.
Not that you really care, but.
All right, we've got 10 more minutes to our show. I want to make some announcements while there's a small lull between questions. Please join us next week. We've got Lorraine Childs from NAMI Durham, fantastic person. She was raising her child the way she was raised. I'm your mom, do what you say. Then her daughter was diagnosed with defiant mood dysregulation disorder and autism. Her journey is very inspiring. And she's a wonderful, relatable person. Next week with Lorraine Childs. The following week, everything you ever wanted to know about electroconvulsive therapy, but were afraid to ask. ECT. Cynthia Pilch once thought ECT was barbaric. Today, she's a big proponent because it's made a huge positive difference in her life with depression, treatment-resistant depression. That's 2 weeks from now. The Thursday after that is Thanksgiving. So please come back. Please fill out our survey after you leave this Zoom session. A survey will magically appear. You can help us improve over time. Tell us what you liked or didn't like. And it also helps us show our funders, yes, we're tracking what we do, and this is the value of it. So, Sean, do you have any closing arguments?
We covered a lot. I can talk a lot about this stuff and go on, and I'm not sure anybody wants to hear that, but yeah, my message is always about what you can do to help others more than what you can do if you're in pain. But that's also an important thing that people need to hear. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that you talk to. Hey, here's how you get help. Here's what you can do if you're suffering from something. Great. But my MO is almost like, yes. And what I want you to do, if you can, is create those spaces for people so they can be heard. And really, I feel like it becomes almost like, oh yeah, of course people need to be seen and heard. It's like, no, they really do. We just say it, oh, it's like one of these things we say like, yep, seen and heard. Maybe that's where people start with it, but I think it's so appreciated and understood. Is that, can you say that? Misunderstood or understood?
I like understood. Just
I kind of think that's a great new word I just made. They just don't. Some people get it. Some people are brilliant at it. They're great. How do we get more people to get on board with that is the question.
I think one draw is the benefit to myself. If I'm helping others, if I'm doing a support group, listening to someone else and creating that space, even having a dog and being kind to my dog, all of that influences my self-talk in a way that is healing for me.
Yeah.
So hopefully people can be drawn to that.
Right. Yeah. And for people that just are not, they get like it's like the cooties. I don't know. People would say, oh, but like it's all so dark and depressing. I'm not sure what to say to them. I don't know what that conversation looks like. And maybe there's enough other people where that's where I should spend my time. Like I don't have to, but it seems like there's a significant portion that, no. Okay. Pick your battles, right?
Yeah. It's interesting the way the world works. We have this thing that we call shared reality, and there are huge gaps in it, huge gaps in the human experience that just they're deprived of that sunshine of being officially part of shared reality. And that leaves us alone and in the dark. And so if we want to break out of that, I guess we just keep talking to each other and go
Maybe
from there.
make that circle a little bit wider each time. I will say this, when oftentimes, this is always just what Sean thinks. The stuff that you might think is dark is like giving someone the space to talk about it is like the opposite of dark. It might feel so dark, insert word, dark, depressing, whatever word you want to put there. But for someone who's in pain or needs to talk, that's like the opposite of that. Forget the content of what they're talking about. It might be about suicide. It might be about school. It might be about a girl or a boy. It might be about their body. It could be anything. Not dark. Light. Right. So give that light.
I love that. Yeah, you're right. I mean, you're opening up the door to that light for that person.
Yeah.
So okay.
That's it. Thanks.
Well, that is it. Gary's words, I think, make a nice closing statement. I think your words, Sean, could start a movement of listening and compassion.
I love it.
Yeah, let's do this thing. All right. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I hope to see you again in the future. Sean, thank you so much. This has meant a lot to me personally. I really appreciate your time here and all your comments.
Thank you.
And Bree appreciates you too.
Thank
all
you.
Right.
Appreciate you too.
All right. Hope to see y'all next week. Be well in the week ahead. And don't forget to listen. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Night.